Hi guys, today we're going to study about the parts of a plant. Now we see plants everywhere. They come in different colors and sizes. Next time you see one, it's nice to know what do you call this part or what do you call that part. So let's start. We're going to start with parts of the flower first because that's the first thing that you see in a plant. They're very colorful. They're very fragrant. Now at the bottom, or what we call the base of the flower, we see a bulb-like structure. Looks like this. This bulb-like structure is what we call a receptacle. The receptacle holds the parts of the flower together. So think of it as a small hand holding all the parts together. See, it looks like a small fist right here. Now above the receptacle, you see green leaf-like, tiny leaf-like structures. Sometimes they're open like that, or sometimes they're closed like this, like hugging each other. But either way, we call them the sepal. Now we see the sepal close when it's still holding a tiny bud or a tiny flower, but when the flower is already in bloom, then the sepals are open like this. Now above the sepal is another bulb-like structure, which looks like this. You can see this inside a flower. This is what we call the ovary. The ovary is where seeds are produced. How are seeds produced? We're going to discuss that later on. Above the ovary is a passageway, which we call the style. And there's an opening right here, which we call the stigma. The stigma. Now the style, the stigma, and the ovary is collectively known as the pistil, which is considered the female part of a plant. Okay, now around the pistil, we see stalks like this, small ones. We call these ones filaments. Now on top or on the tip of the filament, we have what we call the anthers. The anthers is where a pollen is produced. And we're going to go to my favorite part. My favorite part of a flower is actually the petal. They're very colorful. I chose red because it's my favorite color. This is what we call the petal. It is very eye-catching and it's very fragrant. Why? Because it attracts insects like bees or even butterflies and other insects like ladybugs, because they transport the pollen, which is produced again in the anther part. The insects help transfer the pollen from the anther to the stigma, where it travels to the ovary to get fertilized and produce seeds. And that process is what we call pollination. Again, pollination is the process of transferring the pollen produced by the anthers to the stigma to enter the ovaries to become seeds, and you know seeds can make another plant. Okay, now down to the rest of the parts of the plant. After the receptacle is a small stalk, which is what we call the peduncle. The peduncle is connected to the stem. This is what we call the stem. Now, the function of the stem is that it holds the flower up, it holds the whole plant up, and also, more importantly, it transports nutrients from one part of the plant to the other parts of the plant. Now, what are those parts of the plant which produces or which absorbs nutrients? First, we have the leaf. Here's our leaf. Leaf, if there's a lot, we call them leaves. Okay. This is the part of the plant where food is made by a process we call photosynthesis. Now, what is photosynthesis? Like what I mentioned to you guys earlier, it is the process by which plants make their food. Now, how does that happen? From the word photo, which means light, and synthesis, which means combination. So we combine light with other elements so that plants can produce their food. Now, what do we combine? Light. And where does this light come from? Light comes from the sun. Light comes from the sun. It is absorbed by the leaf and other nutrients in the environment we call carbon dioxide or CO2, and water from the soil, which goes up to the leaf, gets absorbed. Carbon dioxide from the air gets absorbed by the leaf. And this process, where we combine the sunlight, the carbon dioxide, and the water, is what we call photosynthesis, which has an end product of sugar, or what we call glucose. Now, once glucose is made in the leaves, it gets transported by the stem to the other parts of the plant. It goes down to what we call the last part, which are the roots. Now, the roots is what anchors the plant to the soil. And it also absorbs nutrients from the ground so that it can also be transported to the other parts of the plant. Now, the nutrients coming from the leaf, transported by the stem to the other parts of the plant, is what we call phloem. If the nutrients are coming from the roots and transported to the other parts of the plant, that is what we call the xylem. So again, phloem leads to the other parts of the plant, xylem, nutrients from the roots to the other parts of the plant. So that is part of the plant. And let's review. These are your roots, your leaf, your stem, the stalk here is your peduncle, the bulb-like structure is your receptacle, the tiny leaf-like structures is what we call sepal, enclosing the bud. These are your petals, which attract the insects. This is your ovary, where the seeds are produced. The style, the stigma, is the opening. You have stalks here, which we call the filament. The anther, which produces the pollen. Now the insects get attracted to the petals, transporting the pollen to the stigma, which is what we call pollination. And there you have it, the parts of the plant.